Just welcome back to another episode of the Post Show podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I'm really looking forward to today's chat. We're talking to Calliope Draper, who just won 50 Best Bars Roku Scholarship for 2024. So we're going to dig into the journey they had going to 50 Best Books. It's amazing. It's in Madrid. And their plans for the future. So give me 2 seconds. I got to click a couple more switches. There's one more switch there. And good morning, Calliope. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing all right. I mean, yeah, all things considered with last night, but I'm doing good.
Good. How long have you been back home? Because did you spend a little bit of time in Europe?
I stuck around in Madrid for a couple extra days. I got back on Sunday last week, so I've been
Okay.
back for like just over a week now.
Is it setting in? Is it sunk in?
It's starting to, yeah. I mean, it didn't for a while. Like it took a few extra days. Like even when I was still there, like even holding like the 50 best plaque in my hands, it didn't feel real yet. But I think it was like when I got home and got to like celebrate with like my friends, my family, and really get that going was kind of when it start to feel real.
So I start off every episode with your origin story. How'd you get into bartending?
I got into bartending as a guest. James Grant, Edmonton-based bartender. He worked at a place called Little Hong Kong that was down the street from where my brother lived, and we would go there consistently, the two of us. And then one night, the first night I walked in, I just had a cocktail and I had an experience that just absolutely changed what I thought bartending could be. It just like it opened so much. It was so refined. It was elegant. It was inclusive. It was meaningful. It was just one of those experiences that we aim to create on our day to day, like that, just like perfect guest experience, and that changed everything for me. A couple years after that, James won World Class Globals, and I was like, well, he's a judge now. I'm a random ass like home bartender working at home. Like from during the pandemic, I was working as in like a social work capacity. I was like, well, I can enter a cocktail and go nowhere with it, sit at his bar in a couple weeks, get some feedback, and just refine this little hobby I have. Instead of that, I made it to the Western Canadian finals. That's where I ended up meeting Harry and Kate and became fast friends with them. Made it to the national finals and then didn't look back. The entire time for that, I was still just working as a like working in a social work capacity, still a home bartender. And then it wasn't until July of that year, July of 2021, that I got my first job behind a bar.
Wow. So it's a bit of a whirlwind.
It really was. Like it was out of nowhere. And it was the sort of thing where I was like, if there's ever a sign to do a career change, I feel like something along that path was that sign.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, but 2021, like especially just coming out of the pandemic, like, and then doing world class as your first like bartending like experience, like,
Yeah.
that's an intense competition to like just jump into.
It was my very first time behind a professional bar, like completely so. It was behind the bar
Wow.
that started it all for me at Little Hong Kong because regionals were at Edmonton that year. And I believe it was Chris Enns, Caitlin Stewart, James Grant, and it was a food pairing challenge. So the chef we had the food pairing with Ben Staley, and they were my first ever four top. I might be mixing up. There's a few other challenges in there, so I might have mixed up the exact judging roster. But still, to this day, scariest four top of my life.
So, congratulations on the 50 best. We just talked about that and it's settling in. And what can you describe what it means to be recognized on that level and how it's impacted you personally?
It means a lot, especially like as a trans person, as a queer person. One thing that I was able to like have, to the best knowledge of almost everybody involved, I am the first transgender person to win a global bar comp.
Wow.
Which is wild to think about. And it's a big deal in terms of representation, in terms of what can come next, in terms of who can see themselves represented in what excellence looks like. I think that's the biggest thing with the 50 Best Scholarship and with the Roku 50 Best Scholarship is that it's very much so from an organization that directly denotes in a very clear way what excellence is looking like in the industry through the awards, through the list, There's a lot of other ways that excellence can come up in the industry. There's a lot of other ways to quantify it, but 50 Best is very much a present and institutionalized one of what excellence looks like. And to have, especially in times like now, the face that they're looking for young bartenders, for people getting started in the industry, to have that be a face that's unapologetically queer, unapologetically trans is big. It's gonna open a lot of doors. So that's been, I think, the biggest thing for me is like the entire process going forward is gonna be absolutely amazing. Getting to work with like Keith Motzi at Virtue, Ueno-san at High Five, Stefano at maybe Sammy. Sorry, my cat also named Sammy. So yeah, I think he's understanding that we're talking about him. Working with Stefano at maybe Sammy, it's going to be a fantastic like whirlwind experience. I'm going to learn a lot, but there's also so much that's going to come from this for other trans people in the industry who might not feel like they've been welcome in a lot of the more craft cocktail spaces.
So with the industry always evolving, what are the core values and principles you sort of keep to guide your journey through this sort of level of inclusivity and representation?
I think for me, a lot of it is there's a politics to hospitality that I always like to reference, that we, in a very direct way, are shaping communities by who feels welcome at our bars, who feels welcome in our restaurants, and how we craft that space is going to shift who comes in, who other people see when they're in there, and if you see people that you might not expect, if you are still there, they're being welcomed in, they're being included in, that is going to be how you see the people who have a similar interest, who have a shared space, who are going out to these same places, and that's common ground. And to build that common ground directly, especially in times where a lot of that tends to be fading away, is really important work, and it's very directly political work. So how we shape who feels welcome in our spaces shapes who a lot of people see as part of their communities in a very direct, like geographical sense, but also in like an interest sense. So that's a big thing for myself is looking at this work as kind of a political community building work, and then also just recognizing that there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Like not a lot of people are tired. People are getting a little sick of it, I feel like, and it just keeps on coming. And there's a importance of creating hospitable places in a world that's starting to feel more and more hostile. I think that's something that I really hold dear. Is it's a responsibility, but it's also a privilege to be able to take stewardship of these spaces and to really try and have people feel welcome, have people feel luxurious, have people feel like they can from everything that's happening.
How do you approach that? Like when you walk into a new venue or a venue brings you in, how do you approach that with training and education in this sort of space where you're trying to make everybody feel inclusive and comfortable? How do you approach that, and how do you do that with traditionally a very traditional style of hospitality? Like we are, in essence, a very old school mentality, and hospitality has very different definitions for people. How do you approach it when you walk into a venue?
I think the first thing for myself is recognizing that like nobody wants their guests to have a bad time when they're coming in. People want to create those experiences, and oftentimes we're not thinking about who different types of people are coming in. We're just thinking, how can I have a good service? How can I get through this? How do I keep my stock levels up? Like how do I make sure that I'm not going to be running out of my batches or my garnishes or whatever it is? And we just want to have a seamless experience for whoever's sitting on the other side of the bar. And when it comes, oh, hey, sorry. There's been a couple people who have given me flowers, and the cats absolutely love the flowers. But we want that seamless experience on the other side of the bar for people. And when it's somebody who has a different life experience, they're going to be facing different blocks. There's going to be things that we're doing, things we have structured in certain ways that we might not have thought about because it doesn't necessarily affect us. And so when it comes to those sorts of things popping up, it's not about the intentionality of not having done it. It's not that we're actively trying to exclude people, but it's that there's an issue that happens that we might not have seen that we can now deal with, and we have the power to change that, shift that, factor that into how we go about our next service. It's the sort of, and I think that's one thing I've really found is that, like, in the day to day, nobody in the hospitality industry, at least people that I've been lucky to meet, wants guests to have a bad time. And it's just expanding which sort of guests we're thinking about before we even open the doors. And that's the biggest thing. The other side is oftentimes I find inclusivity stacks. Like, the joke I always like to say is that if you're looking for a place with gender neutral washrooms, find a place with gluten-free bread. Like, it's inclusivity stacks. People who care about one side tend to care about other factors, and they start to think about other factors. And then they start to think about, okay, how do we, like, create an inclusive space for different body types? How do you create an inclusive space for folks who aren't enjoying alcohol? What does that look like? So it's just about opening that mindset to see different perspectives when we're going about it, not necessarily challenging the work that's already been done, because we're already creating inclusive spaces. But it's how do we broaden what the actual factors we're looking at are.
I like that. Just broadening the scope and just thinking about how things are evolving for everybody. Like, I've had a lot of conversations. You brought up non-alcoholic cocktails. Like, I had a lot of conversations with people. I'm like, is it staying? I'm like, yes. Like, non-alcoholic beverages are staying. If you're not investing in your non-alcoholic cocktail program, you are going to be losing money in the next 6 to 12 months. Like, the
100%.
Gen Z generation is one of the biggest drinking generations, and they aren't drinking. Like, that's
Yeah.
just what they're not doing.
Yeah, completely. And I think, like, a lot of it is, like, even for myself, like, I still drink, but I alternate. I'll have, like, one cocktail, one non-alc back and forth throughout the evening to just pace myself a little bit better. Or some nights I might not drink at all, and I'll just go for the non-alcs, and I'll, like, go outside, maybe enjoy a little bit of the Canadian legal cannabis, and then go back into wherever I'm at, and that's my beer for the night, you know?
Mhm.
It's how we're engaging. It's a bit different.
So, with what's entailing the 50 best bars? What's going to come next with the 50 best scholarship? What's your plan with the scholarship money?
So the process is there's going to be a series of stages, two in Tokyo, one in Sydney, and then one in New York with the Suntory Global Office as well. So that's, like, the big
Jesus,
main
that is
spot.
awesome.
It's going to be a busy next year. I think I was doing the math, and I think in the next 6 months or so, I'm going to spend at least 3 of them just, like, out of the country. Um,
Wow.
so it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of traveling. So that's the biggest thing is to get the absolute most out of I can out of that, but then also continue on with my own day to day. I'm working on the second issue of the hospitality zine that I started,
Mhm.
Places You're Welcome. So we're working on that. We're hoping to end that, get that more sustainably structured, because right now it's just myself running it. Like, it's all, like, I'm doing the graphic design, I'm doing all the editing, I'm doing all the interviewing. I've been able to loop my fiance in to take the photos, which has been really nice to have a extra set of hands on that. But then I'm editing the photos, so it's
Yeah.
very much like a one person thing that I want to have a bit more of a sustainable structure for. So that's definitely on the docket, and then hoping to make it down to Tails this year. I still haven't been able to make it down there, so I'm working on
Mm,
some seminars for that, and
nice.
so it's mostly just kind of keeping the work going. I think the biggest thing that stuck with me from Madrid was a lot of people were saying awards like this aren't the end of the work. It's the start. It's showing that the work you've already done matters and the groundwork you've laid matters. And now you have the platform, you have the space, you have the recognition. What are you going to do with it?
Mm.
It's what comes next. And I think that's the biggest thing is the work I've been doing I can be proud of. I can take a moment to celebrate and take a second to breathe, but it has to keep going now, even more than ever, because I have this fantastic opportunity ahead of me.
Yeah, two stars in Tokyo. Wenu-san is next level. Bar High Five is next level stuff. Like, next level stuff.
I'm so excited.
Oh, that's a dream come true, even for myself. With you now being sort of this sort of representation, and you, as you said, a lot of people said you were the very first trans queer person to ever get a major award on the global stage. Have you had a lot of of your community sort of reach out to you and say, hey, thank you for this sort of representation? Is it sort of put a spotlight and people are feeling a bit more comfortable to be not themselves, but a little bit more open?
I've definitely found that, like, even like, I've been trying to build a lot of community with trans bartenders across
Hmm.
Canada for this past year, and I've been able to chat with a lot of them, and there's been some really, really excited congratulations, but then there's a broader, reach that I've had. I've had folks from, like, across the world reach out congratulating me and have that, like, connection, that conversation about how representation at that level really is important and really does matter. So I think that's been really, really cool to see, is just how much broader that community's already gotten. Um, and I am hoping that a lot of other people feel empowered by this. Like, I've always been under the impression that success isn't how big the splash is, it's how many ripples you have. And I want to take this opportunity to not make it about me, to not make it about, like, what I want or how I'm gonna do in the rest of my career, but to push so many other voices to the forefront, so many other people who are doing this work, who might not be recognized, who might be in, like, a workplace that's not supportive and they're struggling about day to day, but they're doing the work on the back end. People who are, like, creating resources, who are creating like, training programs, that kind of stuff across Canada, across the states, across the world, and to really highlight that work to show that, like, we're here, we've been
Hmm.
here for a while, and this work is really important, and it deserves to be highlighted as equally important as anything else that's happening in the industry.
So you've done a lot of seminars. You said you want to do tails seminars, and you did a seminar at Toronto Cocktail Conference this year with Kate.
Yep.
When it comes to education and training, are you finding the decision makers, the management, the ownerships are coming to you and gain training for themselves, or are you finding that it's more of a down up sort of training schedule? Are you training a lot of the staff, a lot of the community, a lot of the industry, and they're sort of trying to pass that on to the upper management and ownership?
I've definitely found it's been a bit more in the work so far. Like, down up, as you said, like, starting with the people behind the bar, starting with a lot of the people who are, like, passionate about the industry, and then hoping that it kind of shifts that culture, opens that conversation with the owners. Like, going to Toronto Cocktail Conference, a lot of people there were, like, bartenders, not necessarily as much like bar owners. There were some, but a lot of the folks I feel like I've been chatting with and reaching have been just people who are working the bar day to day, who are passionate about hospitality, who know how to make a great drink, but want to create a space that's even more intentionally inclusive than it already is. And oftentimes, the people that are coming to these trainings and coming to these seminars are people that are already doing the work and wanting to expand their reach, expand what they're talking about, find some new key points, get some research. Oftentimes, yeah, the main people in the audiences are the people who are already doing the work, wanting to just kind of have that moment of validation. Because oftentimes, going about doing this work day to day, it can get exhausting. A lot of it is just, like,
Mhm.
persistence. A lot of it is just really finding those moments to, like, keep going, keep pushing for it, keep trying to find a way that makes sense with however you're communicating it and whoever you're communicating with. Um, so having these spaces with them, my biggest goal is, like, how can I provide you with the resources you need to have those conversations be as successful as possible when it comes to talking with your owner, like the bar owners, with your bar managers, whoever is making that decision in your space you're in.
Have you ever thought about, and I don't want to say monetize, 'cause it's sometimes a dirty word, but have you ever thought about doing like a structured course for workers as well as ownership and management, and like being able to be hired and brought in to like do a proper whiteboard and PPT style course for the industry?
That's definitely something I've thought about for a while. It's something I've been, like, working on a bit in the background with, like, alongside other projects. And it's the sort of thing where, like, I wanna get this out to as many people as possible and really, like, help fill some gaps that I see. And however I can do that is the best way I can do that. Um, so that's something I've been trying to have structured for a little while. I've done it in a bit less of a formalized way, coming in
Mm.
as, like, a consultant, doing, like, a one-off training here or there. But to have, like, a full structured, like, program or full like a full syllabus laid out of how to go about making these changes is It's definitely it's a big like project to undertake, but it's something I think would be really beneficial across Canada to have somebody that has like a full like plug and play.
Hmm.
Here's how you run a seminar like this. Here's how you have this conversation. Here are like the top 5 like issues that tend to happen. Here are how you like structure an intervention with a guest that's not being
Mm.
inclusive or creating an uninclusive space. And how do you to create a code of conduct? How do you create a code of um, like for your staff, for your guests, like that kind of stuff. Uh, at my seminar at Talk this past year, Christina Vera had made a comment about how it's absolutely absurd that more like right now there's more protections on average for the staff in strip clubs than there are in cocktail bars.
Mm.
And it's like we need to have from a structural level, not just a cultural level, a shift in how we start to deal with these things.
Yeah, I think uh, the customer's always right, and that sort of old school mentality. Like, I have a very zero fuck policy at Clive's. It's like
Nice.
if you offend one of my team, if you act out, if you're being a dick, see ya. If you're a dick at the door, bye. Like, if you're gonna
Yep.
misbehave, this isn't the space for you to be in. Like, not at all. And we've had it's a bit of an anecdote, but like we had a gentleman from I won't say what organization from an organization actually like grab one of my team and look at her tattoos, and she was very uncomfortable. Obviously, they got ejected, but then they got banned from the organization and banned from ever coming to Clive's and banned from ever coming to Vancouver Island to do the thing that they do. And
Wow.
so we made a formal complaint to the organization because he was very high up in the organization. We're like, this guy did this, he was a dick, gone, and he's never stepped foot in the hotel ever again.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was like, nope, that's it.
Yeah.
um What
Def
advice would you give to other hospitality venues looking to improve their inclusivity for their guests and their staff? What are the common pitfalls that you see when you walk into a space? Are there at the times when you walk into a space, and I can do it as a cocktail person, you see like little service things and like, but you have a much bigger scope. Like, is there things that you walk into a bar and go, nope, that shouldn't be that way?
I think the biggest thing, and it ties back to what you're saying, is what you just the story you just said was sometimes creating inclusive spaces means saying no to people. It means like sometimes removing people who are the issue. And that can sometimes be a bit of a hard pill for a lot of folks to swallow, is that by trying to accommodate everybody, for trying to make everybody equally feel comfortable, that in of itself can create
Mm.
hostile situations. If I'm sitting at a bar and like 3 seats down from me, I hear people like saying some really transphobic stuff, and I overhear it. I kind of like look at the bartender, like maybe raise that with them. If they hear it, or even if it's like a joke that they tell to the bartender, how they interact with that is going to shift how my experience for the rest of the night goes. Um, so even as simple as like knowing what the line is in your space and how you're going to move forward for that. How do you like first challenge and see if that continues, or is it like a 3 strikes type thing? How does that go about? So I think that's one big thing is knowing that to create an inclusive space, sometimes you have to have a bit of exclusivity,
Hmm.
as counterintuitive as that sounds. The second thing is like in all of this work, the people who are coming forward with feedback, the people who are coming forward with strategies, with any form of like advice for how to shift, how to change, we're not coming at it wanting to like make you feel bad about how things are
Hmm.
currently. It's very much, hey, I noticed this. I like love your space. I just want to see it like grow, improve, and get better. They're like somebody comes with feedback because they're bought into the idea that you're already creating there. And that's the biggest thing is so often I find when I bring up an issue, oftentimes it can people can get a bit on the back foot. They get a little like defensive, and that's understandable. Bars are there are babies. And like I feel like all of us have had that experience of like we're on Google Maps. we've clicked our restaurant, we're
Mhm.
reading through the reviews, and then we hear somebody say something like, and we remember that interaction. And there's a
Mhm.
million things that happens in our own experience that the guest never saw. There is like a fire that happened in the back room that we were all trying to put out, and it bled into this one guest experience, and they don't know exactly what happened. So they had feedback, they had a negative experience in whatever way. And sometimes that feedback is constructive, sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's very unconstructive. But um, when it is constructive, it can take a moment to like we have to step back from our first gut reaction and to move around. And I think there's different venues for feedback. I mean, I'm not in people's Google reviews saying, "Hey, you should try and adjust how you do this," or "Have you thought about implementing this policy?"
Mhm.
No, but oftentimes, like when we have that, it can be a bit defensive from the get go. So recognizing that people who are bringing up this feedback, we're here because we're bought in. We're here
Mhm.
because we want to see you succeed, not because we're trying to challenge what you've done or say that you're doing a bad job, but we want to see it grow and improve.
So you mentioned your magazine earlier. Could you tell us a little bit more about that one? Because you said you're doing your second edition. So you're doing one edition every
Yes,
6 months? One edition every
that
six
was the
months ish?
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the original plan was a bit
ambitious,
optimistic to do
optimistic.
4 a year, especially, like, just myself,
Yeah.
and, like, it's all for like, it's all by donation,
Mhm.
so it's like I am running it at a loss to make this, like, the domain, Canva Premium, like,
Mm.
the limited print runs I do for all of them, they're all, like, purely by donation, so I'm paying out of pocket to get this out there. And so it's definitely a bit ambitious to do 4 a year, so I'm narrowing it down to, like, 2, maybe 3.
So what is it about? What does it include? Like for anybody who doesn't know about it at all, can you give us a rundown? What was the driver behind it, and where the direction you're sort of taking it?
Yeah, so, it's called Places You Are Welcome, and it's basically hospitality zine built around, like, queer and trans folks in hospitality. First issue was predominantly Canadian focused, the second issue is gonna be growing a bit bigger, and it's there to kind of showcase the work that's already being done, the people who are doing that work, and to kind of build a community of practice for queer and trans bartenders across the world to share like our strategies for success, our career paths, like what kind of futures we can set up in this industry, and then also showcase like the recipes that we're working on, our cocktails, that kind of stuff. Because I wanted to have a place where I could see more people who are like me in the industry. And it took a while for me to meet really anybody who was also like trans or gender diverse in the hospitality scene. Like in Edmonton, there's maybe one other trans bartender who works at the gay bar, and actually he's not working there anymore. He took some time off to go to school, so I think I might be back to being the only trans bartender in Edmonton. Um, but then, like, in competitions, at conferences, it took a while for me to see anybody who I could relate to. And when I finally started seeing them, I was like, "Oh my god, you're here." And they're like, "Yeah, I've been here the entire time." Like, "Where were you?" Like, I've been
Mm.
looking. I've like had my microscope out, like searching everywhere. So I wanted to create a space where we could connect, where I can find people who are established in the industry who are doing the cool work that I want to be doing, like, as I get more established, as I continue down this career path. And very selfishly, I wanted to talk to them and learn how they did it and share
Mm.
that with the world, and then share that with myself so I could know how they did it and follow that path. So I wanted to just kind of create a space where a lot of the more established or a lot of the newer voices in queer hospitality can share their stories, share their strategies, and just show that we're here and that the work we're doing matters and it should be uplifted as just as important as anything that's being published in like Imbibe or Punch or anything.
Mm. And I'll put the link to your website and everything when this drops, so that makes sure that
Amazing.
we can keep going. That yeah, I've tried my hand a couple times of doing a hospitality magazine in Canada, and doing it by yourself is just so much work.
Yeah.
Just so much. I had a magazine a long time ago. It's still around, but I had a magazine in New York for about 3 years. And at one stage I was writing like 25,000 words an issue, and it was bi-monthly. So I was just like, by the end of it, I was just like, I'm burnt out. I don't even have a byline on this article because every single article was written by me. It's like, nope, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. Looking towards the
Yep.
future, how do you envision the industry sort of evolving over the next 6 to 12 months? I understand the political climate, especially after last night, was it's not exactly where it should be personally, but how do you see our hospitality industry, especially here in Canada, sort of evolving over the next like 6 to 12 months? Well, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, 6 to 12 months, future overall, like bit different scopes. I think in Alberta specifically, a lot of what we're seeing coming out of the States last night is happening here as well. Like I was at the legislature yesterday before my shifts, sitting in as part of an active protest to like watch the legislation actively be passed in front of us, to have them look us in the eyes when they're passing bills that limit queer healthcare, limit our stories being told, limit our participation in society overall. And in Alberta specifically, we know that there's more to come. There's going to be a lot more of that legislation happening. So in the next 6 to 12 months, a lot of it is like, if we can stay the course, if we can stay where we are, that's a win. That's progress. Any step that we can stay on the ground that we're already on, we don't have to push it forward just yet, as long as we can just like weather out what's happening. Because in a very direct sense, in Alberta specifically, there is an active attempt to limit the involvement of people like myself in society as a whole. And it's exhausting, but it means that the work that I'm doing matters. If it's such a threat to have a trans person in public, having a trans person in public actively creating spaces where other trans people feel welcome, that in of itself is revolutionary. If all of the power that they're saying we have to indoctrinate or to like change everything, if all that's there, then we have to use that. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for me is to stay that course. In terms of the industry as a whole, I mean, looking at the quarterly reports, looking at where a lot of the spirits business is, it's a lot of tequila, a lot of like agave, and a lot of non-alcs. And I think that's really interesting to look at. I mean, one of the 2 bars I work at is a fully sober bar. And it's been really, really cool to see how that has like hit the community and which communities tend to be coming in. So I think a lot of it in the next couple of months is going to be pushing the quality of really trying to change how a lot of bartenders see them. Like I've worked in some cocktail bars in the past where it was all just get the regular menu cocktails, and then we launched the menu. It's like, oh my god, wait, we don't have any non-alcs. What
Yeah.
can we just like sub out for whatever is the most basic version of something that is similar to it? And it doesn't have the intentionality, it doesn't have the care, it doesn't have that same level of meaning behind it. And I think that's going to be a big thing for the next few months, is like pushing that standard and like saying no to cocktails and non-alcs that aren't good, and like
Yeah.
challenging that when you're going to an award-winning cocktail bar and they hand you the worst non-alc Negroni you've ever had. Like that's
Juice, syrup, soda. We're
yeah,
past that.
exactly.
We're past that.
We're past that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations, and again, we talked about it earlier. Like, we try really hard at clubs to make sure our non-alcoholic cocktails are on money, and non-alcoholic spirits are not cheap at all. Like, they're a premium compared to, like, I think I always make the example that we use Free Spirits bourbon, and I lost you for a second there.
Sorry about
There we
that.
go. That's okay. We use Free Spirits bourbon. Free Spirits bourbon is $12 more a bottle than our well bourbon.
Oh wow.
It's like $45 a bottle. And so we have a paper plane on the menu. Like, we have a non-alcoholic paper plane on the menu, and it's really, really good. Harry looks after our non-alcoholic program, and he changes it up and put milk punches on the menu and carbonated stuff, and he does a really great job on that one. But yeah, it is something that people I keep telling people, I'm 2% down on liquor sales and 37% up on non-alcoholic beverages. Like, it's happening, and if you're not on board with it, you're already behind the game.
100%.
So we're at the stage of the episode where I give the 5 deep questions, and these are very, very deep questions that always catch people off.
All
And
right.
I give it the same 5 questions to every guest. What is the one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Ooh. I think I've been lucky to have quite a few like once in a lifetime experiences in my life, which has been a massive privilege, like from a lot of the work I've done. But I think in terms of the life I live now, in terms of where I'm at now, uh, the experience that really shaped it was I had been working at a cocktail bar for about 2 years. Management shifted. The individual they brought in wasn't inclusive. They started consistently misgendering me, consistently using the incorrect name, and they were hired up from within the organization. They were fine before they got power. And then after they took over the management, it was a completely different story. And I did what I could. I provided resources, I provided like feedback, training, didn't get better. And sometimes you have to accept that like structures are in place, people are in place. You can do what you can, but you have to step back sometimes and protect yourself and find a way to keep yourself going to do this work in more meaningful ways. I could have stuck around in that bar. I could have like burnt myself out, like run myself to the ground and been unhappy,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't. And I stepped away and I found a really great other bar to work at, a fantastic inclusive community, place that is supportive and excited and like happy about what I'm doing. And I've been able to be so much more successful than I would have been if I stayed. And that success is the best form of revenge in a way. But I think that's the big like that's something that's really shaped how I've been engaging with the world for the past couple of years now, is recognize your limits, recognize how much you're willing to take, and recognize what you have to take to do the work that you want to do. Because I feel like for myself personally, I've always been the type of person who like I'll get tunnel vision.
Mm.
I'll see like one way the world's happening. I'll see like one specific issue and like, okay, let's put everything I can into fixing this. And then as I get tunnel visioned, I keep on putting more and more stuff into that same tunnel. Um, and then eventually it's just like a complete like roadblock and you can't get any further forward. And you have to start taking things that got shoved into the tunnel along the way to refine your scope. And that was an experience that really stuck with me for that of like, don't have to fix this one bar to fix the world. I can
Mm-hmm.
find other ways, can find other people, and I can find places that are going to be more supportive of this work overall.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be, and why?
Just
I
be
told you they were
kind
deep.
to each other. Oh, 100%. Like, just be kind to each other. At the end of the day, the world is hostile, it's difficult, we're all struggling, groceries are expensive, like, everything's going up in price. Support each other, find community, be kind to each other. It's so much easier in life if we're on the same team. There's no need to be, like, turning everything into an all or nothing or a winner takes all type thing. Like, support your friends, support your family, your found family, your coworkers, your community, and just be kind to each other. It gets so much easier if we're just nice. Like, if we don't bring in any anger or hatred, like, check that at the door, have a good time, see how much better life gets overall when you start to do that.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Myself, there's always the obvious, like looking back at myself, there were signs that I was trans, so many signs, and I can only imagine how much life would be different if I had listened to them or if I knew enough about myself, about what the world could be, about trans people, that I could even recognize them. So that's the obvious, that's the gimme on that one. But I think one lesson that I think that I would have loved to have learned earlier is that I belong in those spaces. I belong to do this work. And no matter what like external forces are there, whatever people are saying, any of those roadblocks, that's a sign that the work you're doing matters, not the opposite. And that was something I struggled with for a long time. Like even this past year, I was like, maybe I'm not cut out to be in this industry. Maybe I'm not cut out to do this day to day. Just in various different ways, those thoughts came up, and especially now, like after this past week, that's been a really great way to be like, okay, wait, no, I do belong. If there's ever a way to kind of cut that inner critic, to cut that imposter syndrome, it was something like this. Um, so to know that earlier would have been amazing, and that ties into like a philosophy that I've always had of like the people on the other side of the competition or the scholarship or the job interview, they're more qualified than me to tell me if I belong in this space or not. So I've always been on the philosophy of like apply to everything, because if I'm not, if I don't apply, then I'm taking away the decision from people who are more qualified than me to tell me if I belong or not. So that's always been what I did when I entered world class without having ever bartended. I was like, well, they're some of the best bartenders in the world. They know better than me if this is a good cocktail. So I might as well let them do their job and make that decision. Um, so that's always been a fun philosophy I've had.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
For me, success is the ripples. Like I said, it's not how big of a splash you have. It's not all of like the accolades and all of that. It's measured by the people you have an impact on. It's measured by who carries on that legacy, who goes further than you, who goes further than you ever can. And that's always been like core to myself is success for me isn't success for me, it's success for the people who come after me. And that's been a core guiding factor for me for my entire life.
That's awesome. What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Ooh, I think the biggest hope I have for my legacy is just shifting the standards of what excellence looks like, to add more to it, to have inclusivity be directly tied to excellence in a lot of direct ways, um, in terms of like criteria for measuring like awards, that kind of stuff, to have inclusivity be baked in foundationally. And I think a lot of what I'm doing now with my magazine, with engaging with like a lot of competitions or organizations like 50 Best, like with the scholarship, it is directly trying to help push that and getting me in the rooms with the people who help to design that criteria and having those conversations and having them recognize that it is a meaningful part of it. And it's a long haul process to have that be the norm, but it's in progress.
Do you think, on a personal level, now that we've gone through the deep questions now, because I've got questions now, do you think on a level like, do you ever see inclusivity being looked at the same way that sustainability does on the award circuit? Like we have sustainability awards. Do you think that it's going to be one of the things? I know that a lot of people call on the business side that a lot of people are calling for these awards to sort of have a financial aspect to them. Like, are you actually making money as the world's best bar, such and such? Do you think inclusivity will eventually be a portion or a standalone in these award judgments?
I would love if they did. I think that's a big goal of me, a goal of mine to see something like that, to have a like inclusive hospitality award
Mm,
tied into these sorts of spaces. I did chuckle a little bit when you use sustainability as the example, because I think going to the way that sustainability has in a lot of these spaces, it's become a bit of a buzzword where every
mhm.
brand has a sustainability comp, and it's like how do you use this brand and then find a way to tie sustainability into it. Um, and I think there it can get a bit um, kind of disjointed, a bit like
Mm,
untethered from the actual act of sustainability in of itself, where people make really great cocktails that to make once for a competition is like zero waste, but isn't gonna
mm.
ever work behind a bar consistently. And I think looking at something like the Torres Brandy Zero Challenge, that's a fantastic sustainability initiative that has like money incentives to implement these projects behind a bar, and it's built for that. But a lot of the sustainability like comps, a lot of the sustainability discussions tend to be a bit surface level. So I think with that specific comparison, I'm hoping we can go deeper. I'm hoping we can like bake it in further into the foundation.
That's awesome. Well, enjoy the next 6 to 12 months. I am extremely jealous that you get to go to High Five Bar and maybe Sammy and New York, and it's an impressive achievement. I'm really really impressed with you. I really am. Well, we've known each other for a couple of years, and like it's been great having you sit at the bar when Harry came to Edmonton and hang out. And so I just want to say thank you for all your efforts, and I'm glad that you gained the attention and admiration that you deserve. So I just very impressed with just everything that you're working on and everything you've been doing. So just thank you so much for being on the show.
And thanks for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here. Like you're a titan of the Canadian bartending community, and like being able to sit here and chat with you about my my silly little projects and the stuff I've been working on is it's really fantastic that you'd want me on here.
Yeah, Titan and old are two very different descriptors.
Very different. Yeah.
Yeah, being around the longest is usually what makes you a Titan.
But that's sustainability. That's effective management. That's
Thank you so much for being on the show, Callie. I'll talk to you really soon.